Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're diving deep into the really extraordinary world of Indian poetry written in English.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
Absolutely. Our mission is to trace centuries of its evolution, from those early echoes of British verse right up to the vibrant sort of genre-bending voices we hear across the globe today.
Hmm.
You'll uncover how this unique literary tradition constantly challenged assumptions, grappled with complex identities, and really carved out its own vital space, all while staying deeply rooted in the Indian experience.
It's a truly fascinating journey. It reveals how poets navigated, the profound influences of colonialism, forged a distinct voice after independence, and even confronted urgent social and political questions through their art.
Yeah.
So get ready to explore a rich and frankly often overlooked corner of world literature.
Okay, let's begin at the beginning, shall we? Back in the broad 19th century, this was such a pivotal time exploring both Indians writing in English and, maybe surprisingly, the English writing in India.
Right, that dynamic is key.
And we really have to start with Henry Louis Vivian de Rossio, widely recognized as the first Indian poet in English. His background was quite unique for the time. He was of primarily English and Portuguese descent, a background then termed Eurasian.
And in 1827, his collection Poems basically declared his arrival on the poetic scene.
Yeah, announced his candidacy, as the source says.
What's striking is how de Rossio strategically positioned himself as this inaugural figure. He clearly understood that India lacked what he called an organic Indian literature in English at that point.
So what did he do?
Well, he quite literally distributed leaves from his scrapbook, asserting his ambition and staking a claim for this new tradition he was trying to build.
Wow. And he also engaged with those Orientalist traditions.
Critically engaged, yes, that's the Western academic study, and often, let's face it, romanticized, exoticized colonial portrayal of Eastern cultures. De Rossio subtly challenged the perceived artistic dominance, the positional superiority of British poets like Lord Byron.
How so?
You see it in poems like Heaven. He was basically asserting an Indian voice as equally valid, equally capable.
And he didn't shy away from difficult social issues either. De Rossio undertook a truly ambitious project with the Fakir of Janghira in 1828.
A major work. And it notably critiqued the practice of sati, describing it as a spectacle of misery.
Our sources highlight a really complex viewpoint here, though. De Rossio apparently even suggested that sati would be tolerable if the wife had married the husband for love in the first instance.
It's complicated, isn't it? It reveals a poet really wrestling with tradition, not just outright condemning, perhaps. He believed the responsibility for a native literary tradition wasn't just about the poet's writing, the production side, but also about the cold world eye, the reception, the engagement that the poet might inspire in their audience, opening that eye.
That's a crucial point about reception. Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises an important question about the British poets living in colonial India during the same period.
Right. Many of them engaged in imitation adaptation, but often with a sense of, alienation.
Like Anna Maria.
Exactly. A pseudonymous Delakroskan poet publishing in Calcutta, 1793. Delakroskan poetry was that, late 18th century sentimental, quite ornate style.
Okay.
And her verse was largely formulaic. It echoed contemporary English poetics, but hardly reflected her immediate Indian experience. Her Ode to Happiness, for example, saw joy everywhere, from Greenland's bleak, unfriendly coast to the tropics, but pointedly stated, no India here, no Hooghly or Calcutta.
It's striking, isn't it? Even when she briefly invoked India's god Brahma in another ode, the mention just sort of eddies away, fades out.
It strongly suggests these British poets, despite being in Calcutta, still primarily imagined their audience back in London, not the land they were actually living in.
Not engaging locally.
Not in the same way.
Yeah.
In contrast, you have figures like John Horsford, a British military and civil servant. He used poetry to promote colonial lives, but in a unique sort of blended way.
How did he blend them?
He married neoclassical poetic forms with local Indian features. For instance, in his tender Ode to My Infant Daughter, Eliza Howrah, he calls her child of the lily and the rose, but also speaks of connubial love in Howrah's wampy scented grove.
Bringing in the local specifics.
Exactly. This highlights him as an English poet of Indian themes and lives, including his own, which was a pretty rare integration for that time.
That's a fascinating example of how India was starting to maybe seep into the British poetic imagination, even if it's just for some.
And we also see Sir William Jones, the famous Orientalist scholar poet. He genuinely believed Sanskrit mythology and poetics could rejuvenate the English poetic imagination.
Really? He thought it could help English poetry.
Yes, his innovative The Hymn to Camdeo is a prime example of this, trying to create a cross-cultural fertilization.
Interesting. So as the century unfolded, this landscape of poetic identity kept shifting.
Dramatically. Consider Michael Madhusudan Datta, a mid-19th century Bengali poet who actually began writing in English, but later made a significant shift to Bengali. He'd had unsuccessful attempts to publish in Britain, and it's very telling that in an 1842 letter, he clearly self-identified as a Hindu, a native of Bengal, and study English at the Hindu College in Calcutta.
That journey really underscores the growing tension, the choices poets faced.
Absolutely. And that shift from English to Bengali is incredibly telling about that search for a native voice.
It also brings into focus the challenges faced by women poets in colonial India.
Huge challenges. They often had far more limited access to classical languages compared to men.
But there were exceptions.
Remarkable exceptions, yes. Like Mary Leslie, who was not only bilingual in Hindi and Urdu, but also fluent in Bengali, and even studied other European languages. Quite something.
Definitely. And Mary Carshore.
Born in India, offered another perspective. Unlike many British poets who wrote about exile, she translated local songs and airs, suggesting a deeper immersion, a different relationship with the place.
And Emma Roberts. She took a more political stance.
Yes, an explicit political edge in her poems, forcefully opposing sati, linking it to the general oppression of women, echoing some of Derozio's nuanced views on the subject, interestingly enough.
It's interesting how, amidst all this serious grappling with identity and social issues, the 19th century also had this lighter side emerge. Though maybe lighter isn't the right word. Comic verse?
Yeah, comic verse, but often with its own cutting critique. This genre was frequently characterized by British alienation from India, satirizing Orientalism.
None later.
Later, it even expressed contempt both for aspiring Indians and their British sympathizers. You see it in things like the limerick Young India. These poems often serve to emphasize a kind of simple, prosaic East, pushing back against the romanticized complex view.
Right, simplifying things, perhaps. Okay, let's move forward. Into the mid-20th century, we witnessed the forging of a distinctly modern Indian voice, especially post-independence, leading up to the millennium.
A crucial period. After India gained independence, there was that strong Angrezi Hatao, or remove English, movement.
English seen as colonial baggage.
Exactly. Which unfortunately meant local publishing platforms for English poetry just dried up. They became almost non-existent for a time.
This created a real vacuum then.
A critical one. And to counter this, P. Lal founded the Writers' Workshop in Calcutta. It was a monumental effort, honestly. They launched over 1,000 titles, primarily poetry in English.
1,000. That's incredible.
It really was. Lal vocally defended the choice to write in English through works like Alien Insiders and The Torch Not the Scepter. He truly believed in the power of this new literary space he was building.
And he posed that fundamental question.
Yes, the existential query for Indian English poetry. Can an Indian poetry in English discharge the function of changing and recreating the language?
Could it actually change English itself?
Right. Most poets vigorously upheld this right, seeing English not as some foreign imposition, but as a tool, their tool for new expression. Others, like Adil Jusawala, had a more pragmatic but equally powerful response. He just said, I didn't know poetry in any other language. For him, it was simply his live of expression, full stop.
That pragmatism is key, isn't it?
Definitely. And this brings us to Clearinghouse in Bombay. A poetry publishing collective started in the mid-1970s by Adil Jusawala himself, along with Diva Patel, Arvind Krishna Mehrotra, and Arun Kaladkar.
A real collective effort.
Very much so. They fostered a strong collaborative spirit, had unique design values, really cared about the look of the books, and were committed to publishing poets who were immersed in English as well as other languages, not just English.
And there's that great anecdote about the covers.
Oh, yeah, with Diva Patel.
Yeah.
He initially wanted a plain cover for his book, hoping to be taken seriously. Classic poet anxiety, maybe.
Oh, right.
But Arun Kaladkar, who designed the covers, eventually created this amazing image for Patel that expressed the human body under conditions of stress, but also a sense of liberation. He compared it to throwing a man up like a kite.
That's fantastic. It's a great example of how they brought their collective vision to life, even in the design details.
Indeed. And this spirit of defining a unique space leads us straight to Nissim Ezekiel and his really pivotal concept of minor literature.
Minor literature. What did he mean by that? It doesn't sound very positive.
Well, Ezekiel, sensing the lack of a clear established literary history for Indian English poetry back then, viewed his work and the work of others as minor. But this wasn't about a lack of quality at all. It
Okay.
was more a strategic choice, an aesthetic of intelligent curtailment rather than explosive dissolution, a conscious strategy for low-key, long-term survival, if you like, a way to build a new literary space from the ground up, separate from the big dominant English traditions.
So building something sustainable, not necessarily fleshy.
Exactly. He outlined these ideals in A Poem of Dedication back in 1953, saying not to hanker for a wide, godlike range, and I do not want the yogi's concentration or the tyrant's endless power.
Hmm.
For Ezekiel, the best poets wait for words, and the wise survive and serve. This philosophy of the minor really laid a kind of philosophical groundwork for this emerging tradition.
And these ideas were spread through magazines.
Yes, little magazines in Bombay were crucial. Ezekiel's own poetry indie was more restrained, providing a platform for thoughtful engagement. But then you had Arvind Krishna Mehrotra's Ezra and Damn You.
Sounds more provocative.
Oh, much more flamboyant, rebellious. They were advocating, quite pointedly, to be ashamed if you write philosophic poems or use the very correct English idiom, really pushing boundaries.
Wow. These magazines were clearly absolutely crucial then.
They fostered this new sense of the cosmopolitan localism that was grounded in the realities of post-independence Bombay. It embraced multilingual engagement, multiple languages swirling around,
Right.
and allowed for a voice at an angle to contemporary politics of monolingual and monoethnic concerns, really challenging the status quo at the time.
Okay, so as the publishing scene transformed, individual poets started charting their own unique paths, adding their distinct style.
Exactly. Each adding their distinct brushstroke to this evolving canvas. Let's look at some of these pivotal figures, maybe starting with Don Moraes.
Okay, Dom Rice, his debut was in the 50s.
Yes, a beginning. And it was initially hard to believe the work of an Indian writer. That's what people said.
What?
Because of its very English rhythm, syntax, and imagery. You know, wizards, princesses, meadows. Didn't sound stereotypically Indian, perhaps.
But his later work shifted.
Massively. It showed an urgent new awareness of and engagement with India and his own mortality, especially in After the Operation, a sonnet sequence set in Bandra, Mumbai.
And how did it shift?
This later work is known for its plain speech. It's very unadorned and confessional, reflecting a profound change in him. The critic Bruce King even observed that Moraes' changing relationship to India was symbolized by his romantic partners, moving from white British to Indian.
That's a fascinating observation. While Moraes was grappling with his shifting identity, another incredibly powerful voice was emerging. Equally revolutionary, but very different. Kamala Das.
Ah, Kamala Das, a truly significant confessional poet. Her life and her writing just flow into each other. They're an extension of each other.
And she didn't just write in English, she changed it.
She reshaped it. Her linguistic radicalism included things like dropping articles, intentionally creolizing English. It was about embodying a raw, unapologetic female experience that shattered both literary norms and, frankly, personal boundaries.
Her work has also prompted queer readings.
Yes, critics note how Das consistently encodes the homoerotic into her work, yet just as consistently devalues its purchase. It's complex. This is despite her personal statement, I failed to respond to a woman. Her courage in addressing these themes highlights how her queerness, as the analysis suggests, also encompasses language itself. It's about more than just subject matter.
Then there's Eunice D'Souza, another important voice.
Yes, focusing on depicting doubly marginalized Goan women, marginalized by both religion, being Catholic in a predominantly Hindu India, and by gender.
How does she show that?
In Marriages Are Made, a cousin is examined for a possible non-Brahmin worm, vividly illustrating the societal pressures and prejudices. Her English is remarkable, too. It keeps the flavor of natural idiom without sounding picturesque or babu, stereotypical.
Like using preggers.
Exactly, in Sweet 16. It makes her voice incredibly authentic and relatable, grounded in real speech.
Okay, and Adil Usawala again. We mentioned him with Clearinghouse.
Yes, his own poetry explores profound themes of violence and pain, particularly in works like Missing Person, which was haunted by memories of partition.
A recurring trauma.
Absolutely. His poetry captures this tension between escape and shelter, jailbreak and re-imprisonment, and his deeply ambivalent relationship with home, which he acknowledged as a place I can neither leave nor love nor properly belong to.
That's powerful.
He later came to a powerful maybe sobering realization that literature cannot bring about radical change. A tough conclusion for a writer.
Indeed. Now, Arvind Krishna Malhotra, we mentioned his magazines. His translation philosophy sounds quite radical. Shoot to kill.
Huh. Yes, that's his term. It means he would obliterate the original to transmigrate its soul into another language. Not literal accuracy, but capturing the spirit.
Can you give an example?
A fantastic one is his Songs of Kabir. He deliberately misread a Hindi word changing jat, which means something else, to jahat for balls to create a specific English idiom.
Right.
The point wasn't just accuracy. It was about creatively wresting the English language from any proprietary native speaker or national community, making it truly, uniquely Indian, claiming the language.
And then there's Arun Kolatkar, who designed those covers, a
The
bilingual
king.
poet.
Truly bilingual, yes. Masterful in both Marathi and English. He strategically used English to reach a wider audience, seeing it as an antidote to provincialism and even a kind of global Esperanto.
And his famous work, Jajuri.
Seminal work, a powerful critique of religious conventions, dissecting faith and superstition with a keen, often ironic eye, based on a visit to a pilgrimage site.
But he wrote about Bombay, too.
Oh, yes. His Kalagoda poems from 2004 celebrate the marginal and insignificant city underdogs of Bombay street sleepers, stray dogs, presenting this cement-eating, blood-guzzling city, pissing silver, shitting gold.
Wow, vivid imagery.
Incredibly vivid, gritty, deeply rooted in that urban experience. This contrasts sharply with Sarpasatra, also from 2004, which is a critique of the Mahabharata, dealing with the dark theme of sanctioned genocide within the epic.
So a huge range. Finally, in this section, Jayanta Mahapatra.
Mahapatra. His poetry often reflects a profound sense of conflict and isolation. This stemmed from his family's Christian conversion during the devastating 1866 Orissa famine.
How did that affect him?
It left him feeling incommunicable, caught between two worlds, his rigid Christian upbringing and the dominant Hindu society surrounding him, a feeling of not quite belonging anywhere.
And his poetry reflects that.
It's often characterized as a meditation on a single theme, the pain of having to wake up in a sun-filled room. It's not a loud protest, but this quiet, persistent ache of belonging to neither world fully.
That's a striking image.
And his imagery is often striking, almost visceral, like in Taste for Tomorrow, where the street lolls out like a giant tongue. Very physical.
It's incredible how much ground we've covered already. From those very early stirrings of an Indian voice in English to this post-independence explosion of diverse, distinct voices.
A huge journey.
Now let's explore the poets of the diaspora and the contemporary landscape. This is where Indian poetry in English really forged global connections and new identities, often beyond India's borders.
Absolutely. And A.K. Ramanujan stands as a towering figure here in both poetry and translation.
They did translations too.
Hugely influential ones. He's credited with the most influential translation of pre-modern Indian literature into English, really bridging ancient traditions with modern consciousness.
And his own poetry.
His lines from Prayers to Lord Murrigan are incredibly powerful, and they resonate across cultures. Lord of the headlines, help us read the small print. Lord of the sixth sense, give us back our five senses. Just brilliant. He dedicated himself to fashioning a literary genealogy for modernism that actually traced poetic impulses back to ancient South Indian literature, showing that modernity wasn't just some Western import.
Creating a different lineage. Okay, then we have Vijay Seshadri and G.S. Sharat Chandra.
Right. Seshadri explores the vast landscape of human consciousness, from birth to dementia. As an immigrant himself, he powerfully conveys that history has a density simply because, in the movement from one society to another, its reality is made more painfully apparent to you.
That experience of moving makes history feel heavier.
More tangible, more real, perhaps more painful. His writing is also remarkable for its style, how his ideas sort of leap and connect, often using simple conjunctions like and or but, paratextual it's called. It creates this dynamic, almost breathless flow, much like how thoughts connect in our minds.
Interesting technique. And Sharat Chandra.
Sharat Chandra, on the other hand, focused more on the ambivalence of the immigrant, capturing that constant in-between feeling.
How does that come across?
In his Immigrants of Loss, he writes, "Scars instead of lines on my palm, I've no biography, only remembrance." It speaks volumes about the deep emotional cost and the lingering presence of the past for those who've crossed borders. No clear narrative, just memory.
Powerful. Agha Shahid Ali is another essential figure in this diasporic landscape.
Absolutely. He described himself as, first and foremost, a poet in the English language, really emphasizing his commitment to the medium itself, despite his deep connection to Kashmir.
And that connection comes through.
Oh, definitely. There's a sheer longing for home that just permeates the half-inch Himalayas, which he wrote when he couldn't afford to return to Kashmir. It's such a poignant reflection of distance and yearning.
But his eye wasn't just personal.
No, his poetic eye often transcends the personal. It moves beyond his own experiences to touch on universal human struggles, broader themes, creating these larger patterns.
Like in Rooms Are Never Finished.
Exactly. His mother and Kashmir are intimately woven into poems that command a range of stories from Christianity, Hinduism, and Islam, showcasing this beautiful, complex interweaving of faiths and cultures.
Then his final work.
The Veiled Suite. It was his third dauntingly difficult canzone, a really complex, demanding poetic form written after his brain cancer diagnosis. It expresses a profound fear of his nemesis and of his own death. Incredibly moving and technically brilliant.
Wow. Okay, moving to the nuanced languages of diaspora and social commentary, we find poets like Meena Alexander, Sujata Bhatt, and Imtiaz Darkar.
Yes, fascinating voices. They grew up with regional Indian languages but developed this complex, often ambivalent relationship with English as their primary language of poetry.
Meena Alexander tackled political violence.
Powerfully. Through the lyric form. She articulated after 9/11 that the lyric poem is a place of extreme silence, which is protected from the world.
A protected space.
But she believed this protected space becomes a very intense place to reflect on the world. Her work, like Raw Silk, juxtaposes Indian religious riots in 9/11 and in Naroda Putiya depicts the absolute horror of Hindu mobs slashing open the bellies of pregnant Muslim women, confronting trauma head-on.
Unflinching. And Sujata Bhatt, known for erotic poetry.
Unapologetically erotic poems, yes, like White Asparagus, which depict a heightened state of female desire during pregnancy. Really bold, challenging, traditional, perhaps more demure, lyric poetry.
And her position outside India affected her work.
Yes, her displaced position allowed for a retrospective machinery of vivid childhood memories looking back. And she also bravely confronted German history in the Vibhahan Pathak, showing how the swastika, once an auspicious Hindu symbol, became forever tainted and horrifying because of the Nazi regime. That collision of symbols.
That's a powerful collision. Imtiaz Darkar offers critique.
An unequivocal critique of Islam and organized religion, yes. In poems like Porta 1 and Porta 2, focusing on cultural indoctrination into shame and the suppression of women.
But she also expresses solidarity.
Absolutely. While critical of Orthodox Islam, she expresses powerful solidarity with Palestinian Muslims and Abu Ghraib victims in poems like Still. She explicitly reasserts her Muslim identity in a post-9/11 context where it was under attack. Her work shows how critique can coexist with empathy and solidarity. It's not a simple rejection.
A complex position. Finally, then, we observed this significant language turn in post-1990s Indian English poetry, an evolving speaking English voice.
Yes, a clear shift toward a more casual English style. You see it most famously, perhaps, in contemporary popular writers like Chetan Bhagat.
How does that manifest?
Well, Bhagat, as our sources note, apparently writes as he would himself speak. He effortlessly incorporates Indian words and adaptations like fishing, meaning looking for compliments or calling things okay types. It's very conversational, very immediate.
This kitschy language, the mix.
Exactly, like the dish, a mix of Hindi and English primarily. It's undeniably driven by the need to sound contemporary, to connect with a huge mass audience. But it also sparks a fascinating debate.
Which is?
Does it represent a vibrant new linguistic identity, a confident claiming of English? Or does it, as some argue, disguise a kind of loss? The loss of the ability to articulate a whole self in any one language. Are people losing fluency in regional languages and maybe not mastering a deeper English?
A really interesting question. Is it gain or loss or both?
It's a question central to the ongoing evolution of Indian English, absolutely.
So as you can hear, Indian poetry in English is, well, it's far from being just one thing. It's not monolithic at all.
Not in the slightest. It's this vibrant, constantly evolving conversation across centuries. A dynamic space where poets have continually challenged themselves and their audiences to redefine what it means to write, to translate, and ultimately to belong.
From Derosio's early resistance to those Orientalist tropes all the way to the intricate, sometimes controversial kitschy of contemporary voices. This deep dive reveals such a rich tapestry. Linguistic ingenuity, personal struggle, profound social engagement, it all comes together.
It powerfully shows us that language is never static, is it? It's a dynamic, living entity, constantly shaped by the very lives it seeks to express.
Absolutely. So now, consider this thought. If a language can be creolized, bent, or even transmigrated, as Marotra puts it, to express completely new realities and identities, what does this suggest about the boundaries of identity itself?
Mm.
Both for a poet forging these new paths and maybe for you, the listener, living in our increasingly interconnected hybrid world, something to think about.